as you see last time, has changed, and basically we motivated a bit differently in the sense we tried to send the message that simple messaging will not work when we are trying to change community norms, when we are trying to change community mindsets. So what do I mean by simple messaging? So this is a paper which I worked with Somanathan, not Rohini, her husband, and this was who was a professor at ISI Delhi. And over there we did a very simple exercise. We went to Gurgaon, we took a sample of their water, and using a very simple test kit, we tested whether it had any presence of fecal bacteria or not. And then when we went back to the households, to a random set of households, we gave them the information that your water is contaminated. These are the things you can do in terms of purifying the water, in terms of storage and handling. And 8 weeks later, when we went back, we saw that these people actually responded and they adopted measures which would make their water more potable. As an ethical stand, we also went back to the households who were opted out of the RCT and also informed them that their water was contaminated. We did not use that set of households in our sample, but we did. Now over here, how is it different from changing social consciousness? Over here, we disseminated information about a very specific thing to the household. We told them your water is not fit for drink. We gave them a specific target which they could adopt in order to make the water cleaner. So what we were doing was we were persuading people as individuals to change what they could do, what they had not been doing before. Okay, and also, as you saw, within 8 weeks, people responded to the information that they were given and actually took measures to make the water more potable. But in terms of social consciousness, or in terms of changing social norms, it's not the same. Because over here, you're not changing a single person. You're trying to change the mindset of the community as a whole. And so even if you change the mindset of a single person, if he lives within a community, confined within a social norm, it will not help. If anything, and I'll give you an example later on. Actually, the second example, the first example, is the thing of why social consciousness, just messaging won't work. Because you try to adapt to the community which is surrounding you. You try to fit into that community. So even though the husband may think that it's not right to hit the wife because she's looking after a child who's sick and she hasn't greeted him when he comes back from work, he still does it because of the peer group effect. And also their expectations. So, the community expects that as soon as you get married, you are expected to provide an heir or a progeny. And so addressing these two things, perceptions and expectations, we can't do it by simple messaging. Now, laws are good. I'm not saying laws are bad, but you also have to think that in an intimate partner violence, there are two agents at play, the wife and the husband. So you're telling the wife that you report to the police because the husband is beating me up. But, so you're sort of posing the husband in a negative view, which is right. But at the same time, if you do it at the individual level, what happens is that it may actually lead to more violence. And there's anecdotal evidence about this. There's not strong economic evidence or strong empirical evidence, but there's an anecdotal evidence that this has happened. That when individuals, but not as a community as a whole, have tried to protest against intimate partner violence or other abuses against women, the repercussions has not been as you would have wanted it to be. So there are some papers on where you change social norms through mass media, and there are these two papers which are there in the literature. But in both these papers, what you see is that attitudes towards domestic violence did not change. Okay? And one reason why they did not change is you're watching an episode on domestic violence in your drawing room on your own. A scene comes where it's uncomfortable for you to watch the scene because you actually perpetrate such violence in your own lives. You can easily walk out from there. And you do not see the scene. Because you don't want to feel uncomfortable. So in some senses, there's no social sanctions over here. There are no threat of social sanctions, and also there's no agency for women in this case. What participatory theatre does is actually tries to overcome both these weaknesses. Quick thing on what participatory theatre is all about. So the way such theatre works is there are two acts to such theatre. In the first act, the theatre troupe enacts out a play using its actors, and the play acts with an act of domestic violence. In the second act, there's a facilitator in the theatre group, and he or she persuades somebody from the audience to come up to the stage and replace the protagonist and fight against the oppression that was shown in the first stage. So what is happening is the audience is actually participating in making decisions, and the way the audience or the community, and this is in front of the community, all that I'm speaking about over here is based on rural areas, not in urban areas. We haven't mentioned in urban areas as yet. So if the actor who goes up on stage and comes up with a solution which the community likes or which the community thinks is sensible, then they actually applaud, and they sort of agree to the solution that the person has come up with. And so in some senses, the entire decision making or the negotiating of what the social norms should be in the future is done in public. I could skip this, but it increases agency, elicits a collective effort, and creates a relatively safe space for trying to find a common ground. The last one is important because, again, there could be repercussions if you try to do it at an individualistic level. Okay. So now let me go back to the paper. So the first few slides is just to show that domestic violence or intimate partner violence is a global problem. If you look at this map, you see that even in the Nordic countries, domestic violence is quite high. So economic development does not necessarily mean that intimate partner violence would be low. Okay? The second graph shows you the countries with legislation on domestic violence. And over here, again you see that at least on paper, there's legislation nearly globally in almost all countries, including sub-Saharan Africa, some parts of sub-Saharan Africa. But putting those two slides together, what one can conclude is economic development and implementation of laws is maybe necessary, but not a sufficient condition to reduce intimate partner violence. And this is a very nice quote from Thun and Hessenius, who have done a lot of work on laws in domestic violence, and basically they say that the law is much more advanced than what a society is. So the society can't accept the social norms which underlie the law. Okay. What I'm going to show you are two videos, and the first video is it's a drama which is enacted by the troupe, and just see for instance. In a typical play is that the protagonist, that is the woman who is getting beaten up, is replaced by a spectator from the audience. Okay? I unfortunately don't have a corresponding video to this, but I do have a video where right choice, like in the villages, people come to the house of the girls and they choose the brides. So over here, how this girl is being made to do different things so that she can be approved by her prospective in-laws, and how she sort of reacts to that kind of a proposal. She's actually a spectator from the audience. So that's the fun part. So, so what we do in this paper, does this work? What we do in this paper is the theatre troupe which does this is a small NGO which is located in South 24 Parganas, and it's called Jana Sanskriti. And the way I sort of got involved in 5 minutes. You're being strict. Okay. So, so basically, we evaluate the Jana Sanskriti. Now you have to recognize that this intervention was there for since late 1998. So, and when I started the evaluation, it was 2010. So there's been a long gap. Also, you have to recognize that while changing social norms, it's not going to happen in 8 weeks. It's not going to happen in 1 year. It takes a long time because you're trying to change the mindset of the community. So, whatever I said previously, it's not going to work in a very short time. It is going to take a long time. Okay, so what do? When we ask Jana Sanskriti, so we are doing a quasi-experimental estimation because it was not in our city, it was not before and after. And so we needed to know that why did they choose particular villages, and that is what they said. Now the first two were easy. Remote areas and largest population was easy to proxy from the census. It was the last thing, the word of mouth. I don't know how many of you are familiar with really rural areas, but over here, when something happens, people sort of communicate that through word of mouth to their relatives who may live within the village or outside the village. And that's how Jana Sanskriti communicated. And what we did was, we used the household roster in our survey, and we picked on the 50 plus years, the respondents who had 50 plus, their fathers or whoever, and we asked them, we went back and interviewed them, and we asked them that, do you all have relatives, friends whom you all used to talk to quite regularly when, who were around 21 years when Jana Sanskriti started. And we thought that was the best proxy to use for word of mouth. When we did a simple correlation, it was 70% between the treatment group and such word of this indicator. Okay, the estimation, this slide I'm going to skip because this is just for the nerds in the thing who want to know whether I've done the econometrics. The econometrics is behind. If you all are very interested in it, just look at the paper. Okay. This is the area from which the treatment and control is. It's in South 24 Parganas. The blue is the treatment and the yellow is the control. Okay, I'm going to skip this. Now these are the results. So what Jana Sanskriti tried to do was try to moved the attention in spousal violence from the manhood of the sailor to much more to the cruelty to his wife. And that could be captured by looking at various responses to the abuse question. And we did find that abuse-free relationship between the husband and wife, it increased in the Janasanskriti villages. The next thing was we wanted to see is attitudes towards violence, which actually the Banerjee et al. Paper actually could not find that attitudes have changed. And over here, we saw that attitudes of the husband particularly had changed in terms of violence against their wives. Lastly, like, household decision making is also very important. And so if you look at the NFHS data, if you look at the raw data, you will see that women household decision making is quite good in many of the important ways. And if you increase the household decision making, they sort of feel more empowered in some ways. And over here also we do find that in the Janasanskriti villages, the women make more decisions. Now, what we did over here was, Janasanskriti can't go to the millions of villages that India has to perform. So we have to see whether it's at all practical. So a village in India has 2 or 3 electoral booths, and Janasanskriti typically performed in one electoral booth and not in the others. It performed in an electoral booth within a village. So we took that as the active area and the rest of the village as the inactive area. And we tried to see that there was a difference between the active and the inactive area. And we saw that there was no difference in terms of changes in physical abuse awareness, etc. within the treatment villages. And this suggests to us that there are spillover effects, and which did not surprise me, because in rural villages, when you go, we are outsiders, we are foreigners too. When we go, even Janasanskriti is, though they look and perform like that, but once they leave the village, they get together and talk to each other. Whether you belong to the electoral booth where Janasanskriti is performed, they do talk to each other, and that's how the communication increases. And that's sort of ratifying that. Finally, again the thing was whether watching a play or not watching a play was important. And again, one would hope that watching a play is not important, because again, from a practical policy point of view, it would not have been very sensible if you had to watch a play to get the norms straight. And over here again we see that watching a play did not matter. I'm going to skip the conclusions, and I'm just going to leave you with a few voices from the village. Thank you.
Just a very nice. I was also thinking about the spillover question. So, just trying to understand. So, the treatment and the control group are from the same village, but they are just from different wards.
No. The treatment and the control are from 2 different blocks. Sorry. I'll just show you the.
Yeah, that's what I was. It just went very quickly. So
okay.
Exactly.
So these, the blues are the 3 blocks where the treatment is, and the yellow are 3 blocks where the control is. So they're 2 different blocks. They're different blocks, but they're contingent to each other, and so we were biasing it against ourselves if anything, if there's spillover effects.
But it could have done. It's just a survey designed because you could have kept a certain distance. Because here there's obviously, as you rightly said.
So I would just like to comment, you showed a slide with all the laws that have been passed against domestic violence in many countries, and you used the word, it has been enacted or implemented in many countries. Actually, if you take the case of India, they passed the law in 2005 under pressure from women's groups, but they've never implemented it. No state has implemented. There's no awareness even that the law has been passed. And I'm just wondering whether a stronger approach would be to do this kind of awareness raising, but also making people aware of their rights and that there's actually a law that, so it's not an either or. I think the way you were presenting it is, okay, laws have been passed, they didn't do very much, let's look at another approach. Right?
I said it was a necessary condition but not sufficient. So it's not either or. So it is both, in the sense that laws are important, and what Janasanskriti does is at the end of the play, when it's after the forum discussion, after the spectators come, they actually disseminate information about the law.
Yeah.
They actually tell them. So it's not, see, they did not do all this from the researcher's point of view. So maybe if I had intervened earlier, maybe I would have screwed up what they are actually doing on ground, and they're actually doing it properly. At the end of the day, the research is not important, but what was important to me is when I moved from the treatment villages, treatment blocks to the control blocks, you could see a distinct difference, even though they were side by side. The field investigators, the first time they came back to me and said, Didi, they called me Didi, it was so easy to do the survey over there. They could understand, they could respond, they knew what they were talking about. It was very hard to do with the control villages. So, the research side is okay, it's fun to do, and I really enjoyed working on this thing, but I think it's really making an effort on the ground. I think it is. Yeah.
Hey, Jyotsna, nice. I've heard of this paper for such a long time. So the first time I actually know something about it, so thank you. No, my question is, I'm going to ask a standard stupid question, but some of the effects on partner violence and so on, they're self-reported, aren't they? Based on, and so how do you control for social desirability bias? So that's one thing. The other thing was really, I think you said something about it, but I didn't quite fully catch on, so maybe you can tell us a little bit more about it. You're saying the intervention was done and you basically followed up like a decade later. And you interviewed some of the 50-plus-year-old. I would love to hear more details of, how many of them actually remember exactly the event, etc., etc. Some details of that would be nice.
We did a social disability bias, and that's fun. So, we had to do it for the journals. So, in terms of the survey, it was done on 15 plus, it was following the NFHs, 15 plus to 49, 45 or 59, I don't remember, I'm becoming old. But the household roster has the list of members, and from the list of members we saw households which had members 50 plus, because they wouldn't be in our survey, but they would be only be with us. And we went and interviewed those members who were above 50 plus to see their connectivity. Because in 1998, when Jana Sanskrit started, they would be around 21, 22, and they would be the agents of change if anybody were to land. And that's why we did that. What is the other question? Thank you.
Just to comment on something you said, that the legal framework might not be enough and might even backfire. There is an Indian student, Anasi Sharma, who did her master essay on the impact of women police stations on violence, and she finds it detrimental to attitude and in particular to attitudes even for women. And so anecdotal evidence, so she did it using the DHS surveys, but anecdotal evidence suggests that when women go to the women police stations, they are lectured on the fact that they should behave with their husband and they can't break their marriage, etc., so that they go back. And so probably maybe this place should be done with law enforcers.
Yeah, I'll take the reference from you later, because that would be a nice reference to put in that. You need something more than just laws. Yeah.
So this reminds me of Mr. Taylor and nudge theory, and since that's now up for grabs to some extent, it might be useful to reflect a little bit on the implications of this for the kind of demonstration effect that you expect, or certainly Mr. Taylor expected. I do want to get to Gaurav's question about reporting, because at NCR, when I was there, we started India's first crime and victimization survey, and it was only in field testing. Unfortunately, the pandemic delayed everything, though now I believe the National Crime Records Bureau is supporting that and NCR is carrying it out. But the difficulty of reporting intimate partner violence is just incredible. And you have to really work out all kinds of ways in which in a household a woman can actually honestly.
Let me comment on that.
So it's a serious question around which I think we need to do a lot of research.
No, let me comment on that, because that is the strength of this work. our field survey, in fact our field coordinator is here and she's become the program coordinator now since I have no field work running out. Jyotsna, just raise your hand. She's done the field survey for us, and our field survey was not done in households. So we actually asked them, do you feel comfortable talking? Many of them told us no. So we used to walk with them around the fields. We used to walk with them while they were, just taking a walk around, and then ask questions. And it wasn't a question that, have you been physically abused? It was narratives. We used to tell them stories and they used to respond. And that's how we quantified the data. Because if you ask me also, have you been abused or have you been scolded by your husband? Why should I share that information with you when I have been elected? But it's through narratives, it's through storytelling. So our question was not long, but each of our questions took about an hour and a half. And the other thing is, you won't see the difference between treatment and control because it was the same if I is going to both. And so if we made a mistake in one, we were making a mistake in the controls also. So we do find something. But the field survey was done so diligently, and without Jyotsna, I could not have done it. She really spent time. We had to leave, we had to dismiss many field investigators because they were not following the rules. And she was continuously in the field for 3 months, just monitoring the work. So I absolutely agree with you. Such surveys are very, very difficult. Such questions are very, very sensitive. But I think there's a desire for the women in the villages to talk about it because they have no one to talk about it. And the first question the first thing they told Jyotsna was, you're the first person who's asking us about our lives. No one asks us. No one. We don't have a way to express our feelings, and that's where I think we require a lot of.
So I just encourage Jyotsna and you to actually write up this part, because I think that would be extremely valuable for crime and victimization surveys, particularly in India and in South Asia very broadly. Because a standard questionnaire, even if you use digital means, you hand a phone, they themselves choose the option, so you don't see the option. All of those stratagems can work, but I still feel very much that what you're going to get is not going to be that accurate. And so your narrative and the time you spent, you should really write that up.
So whenever
You have one more question over there.
Thank you. So I just have one question. So is there a way to see how women who were previously exposed to intimate partner violence impacted? I know you have panoramic data, but did you manage to collect that data retrospectively? For example, sometimes when we ask the domestic violence questions, we ask them, were you exposed to beating in the last 12 months? But did you ask if they were ever exposed?
we didn't feel comfortable asking that because of Shikhar's questions, because you have to see if we were revisiting them, it would have been easier. But we weren't revisiting, and we didn't have pre-questions. So if you ask them such suggestive questions, it doesn't work. We get noise. Okay. Great, thank you. Everyone